Alright, ladies and gentlemen, for the month of June, we're back at it. This time we're entering the world of 3D fighters with Tekken 8. And the character we're covering in Tekken 8 is Zafina.
Possessing's power. I will hold it in.
You win.
This is your fate.
Now, Zafina in Tekken 8 is a stance character, which doesn't necessarily mean anything because most of the roster are stance characters, but what that's supposed to mean is that Zafina utilizes several stances in order to sort of mix up her opponent. So you have like the Scarecrow stance, which does a lot of mids and far reaches. You have the Mantis stance, which does a lot of lows and can low profile some stuff. And then you have the Tarantula stance, which also low profiles, but even more so. Zafina also utilizes Anathema moves, which is she utilizes this demon trapped in her arm, Azazel or something like that, or Azrael, and whenever she uses demon moves, she gets a stack of Anathema, which then allows her to do either new moves completely or follow-ups to some moves that make it safe, and then that consumes the stack of Anathema.
Round one. Fight.
For the story, Zafina is not a huge part of the story in Tekken 8. She really just kind of shows up around the end of like Act 2 or so. She's teaming up with Claudio to sort of steer Jin in the right direction of, utilizing his devil powers, but not being consumed by them entirely. So Zafina and Claudio go to the big King of the Iron Fist tournament that is taking place in the Coliseum. And, it's kind of a trap. I don't know if Kazuya knew that she was going to be there, but she gets beat by Kazuya, and then he frees the demon in her arm so that he can beat the demon and absorb the demon to become, like Super Devil Kazuya. Her goal of kind of steering Jin in the right direction is kind of accomplished. She tells Jin to go back to his origin, which is of course the island that he was born on. But she makes Kazuya stronger in the process. So, kind of a 50-50, in her side solo story, which is kind of canon, kind of not canon, Zafina realizes that the seal that keeps Azazel in her arm is weakening. So she kind of goes on a journey, which is the ladder mode, to essentially release Azazel, beat him, and then reseal him. So not in her story mode, not much changes. Again, she gets help from Claudio. She utilizes the devil energy from both Jin and Kazuya. But overall, it's kind of it's a ladder ending that just maintains the status quo. The ladder starts with Azazel in the seal in her arm, and then the ladder ends with Azazel in the seal in her arm. So, for Zafina's story contributions, they are minimal at most.
Round two. Fight.
Now, for Zafina's special moves, see, this is the difficult part, right? Because when you're talking Tekken, you're talking about a long-running legacy fighting game where the creators don't really believe in taking anything away and kind of boiling characters down to their base components. They kind of just like to keep adding on top of what's already there. So, despite Zafina not necessarily being a super long-running character. I think she got introduced in like Tekken 7 or Tekken 6, right? So she's not like a hugely legacy character. Like every character in this game, she has unbelievable number of moves. So in a normal special move section on this series, I would go over every move, but because Tekken works differently with the commands and stuff, I'm gonna have to do a different process. So instead, what I'll do is I will cover each of the stances and highlight some stuff you can do within them. Now, Zafina's normal, no stance, just straight up boxing with dudes. She has a lot of highs, which means that her attacks are very fast, but unfortunately that means that she can be crouched very easily. And if the main way that she gets into her stances are, strings, which isn't the only way to get into stances, but it is, I think, the main way to get into stances, it makes it difficult to get into her stances, because most of the strings can be crouched. Just a little crouching jab or whatever, and your rhythm's thrown off. Two things I would like to point out. Back square is a super long-reaching, and if you hit it, you go into a guaranteed animation where you do like 50 or 60 damage. You kind of like slash through them. That move, really good to punish whiffs, because it goes super far. If you use it at max range and it's blocked, it is technically punishable. Not too many people, especially at lower ranks, will punish it. And also, at higher ranks, the ranked in Tekken right now is a complete disaster, so at higher ranks they might not punish it either, and that would just be a case of they don't play against Zafina, so they don't really know what to do. But the punish does a lot of damage. It side swaps, which for some people is actually a huge deal. And it also gives you a stack of anathema, which opens up some options for later. Another move that's very good and I'd like to draw attention to is holding back and then square X or triangle circle. What that does is activates a sort of counter stance. So if an opponent is doing a lot of like fast strings but not necessarily finishing any of them, so you can't get any good punishes in there, what you can do is throw out their timing, activate the counter, and just kind of get them off you, and now it's your turn, right? Keep in mind, lows will blow that up, so don't get too predictable with it. It's also good as anti-stance. You fight like a Huarang or whatever, he does a string into stance. Assuming he's not doing a low or whatever, you could just go straight to parry and just kind of blow him up, right? Zafina's first stance is Scarecrow stance. In this stance, she sort of hops on one leg, and the trademark of this stance is that she has a lot of very far-reaching moves that are all pretty safe, and most of them are mids, right? So the idea behind this stance is that you sort of harass the opponent at range where they might struggle to get in, but you can still do a sizable chunk of damage from afar. Now, that being said, while the trademark of the stance is mids, she does do a lot of very good lows. She has a great heat exchanger that is a mid-mid. It's also safe on block, so even if you don't get the engage, it is still safe, and it's very good. I think the most important move for Scarecrow stance, probably the most important move for Scarecrow stance is down forward square. She does a sort of, she activates her claw, smashes on the ground, and like does a little crystal pillar. That's safe on block. It is a mid, I believe. It's actually two mids. And on hit will launch and give you anathema. So I think that's probably her most important move in Scarecrow. Unfortunately, in my footage, you're not going to see me use that move ever, because for a large chunk of time, I forgot what the input was when I was doing the combo trials. So I definitely need to integrate that into my repertoire more often. But overall, again, like, I won't say it anymore, but with these movesets in Tekken, look over them yourself, because you're probably going to find a bunch of stuff that, oh yeah, I really want to use that, or I see no purpose in this move. Which is kind of, an interesting part of Tekken, is that everybody can play these characters a different way. Now, of course, for some of the more meta options, they're going to play the exact same way because it's optimal and all that. But, you can find any way to play any character. They have enough options to where you can make each character your own. Now, for Mantis stance, Zafina kind of crouches down, and on this stance, most of her attacks are low. It's kind of a reverse of Scarecrow, where Scarecrow, most of her attacks are mid, and she has some lows. Mantis stance, most of the attacks are lows, and she has some mids. Now, what is the purpose of Mantis stance? You get to low profile a lot of stuff. Most highs, you just don't have to interact with. Or, sorry. You low profile all highs, right? Which is very nice, because a lot of people's fastest buttons are highs. So if you're kind of applying a lot of pressure with Mantis stance, they might panic and throw out, some kind of jab or something, but that's high, and then you get a punish counter, right? But I think the appeal is that some moves in Mantis stance also low profile even mids. So they might throw out whatever their fastest mid is to, blow up Mantis stance, but you're already doing a move or something that goes underneath even that, and then you get a punish counter, right? Mantis stance also has a handful of mids, which are important to know, because obviously a lot of moves in Mantis stance are unsafe on block, as most lows are. And so to sort of blow up that crouching block option, you need to know some mids that are effective. Now, for important moves of Mantis, no moves in Mantis really strike me as like super important to learn. What I do think you should get used to in Mantis is using it as a sort of transitional style. It's very good to harass people with lows, get them crouch blocking, and then transition into Scarecrow stance, or back to standing. Because a lot of moves in Mantis stance that don't use Anathema are unsafe on block. So as soon as you get them crouch blocking, you really want to sort of evacuate as fast as possible before you inevitably do something that will get you punished, right? Also, a special note for Mantis stance is any character that has an orbital, so think your Bryans or your Lars, you kind of want to be super cautious about using Mantis stance, because the orbital will crush most lows and will blow you up crazy. The final stance is Tarantula stance. So for Tarantula stance, Zafina goes down on all fours like an absolute psychopath. She cannot move backwards, and she can cancel out and block and stuff, but oh yeah, I forgot to mention, with all these stances, you cannot block. So either cancel out of it to block if you want to, or get doing what you want to be doing fast, because it's not too hard for these guys to poke you out because you can't block. So armor moves really blow you up, heat smashes really blow you up, and rage arts are super effective against Zafina. So if your opponent has a habit of using that stuff, really keep your head on a swivel, because that will blow up pretty much any stance. Now, Tarantula stance, the gimmick with this is that it's very fast to approach, and it's super low. So what you can actually use Tarantula stance for is to get in, and then swap to Scarecrow or Mantis, or back to normal. because a lot of Tarantula's moves will automatically transition you to another stance. So essentially the idea is to utilize the crawl speed and a lot of the, like she has an attack that like covers half the stage with like a leap, right? It's not half the stage, I'm exaggerating, but it's a sizable leap. And on block is still safe, and I believe it transitions you to Scarecrow, I think. That might not be true. Tarantula is getting in a strange way, you don't really have much that can contest that because it's even lower than Mantis, right? So anything that Mantis will low profile, Tarantula will low profile, no problem, right? It has a lot of very funky interactions with a lot of moves because of how low it is. So if something ends up kind of funky and you kind of end up on the losing end of that, it's kind of just comes with the territory. It's also very weak to sidestep, because where Scarecrow stance can sidestep and Mantis can also sidestep, Tarantula stance cannot sidestep. So it's very easy to sidestep that and then kind of blow up your whole game plan. And then finally are the Anathema moves. Now this isn't necessarily a stance for Zafina, but it's a big enough part of her preferred gameplay that I should bring it up anyways. So essentially, when you get a stack of Anathema, and that will most often happen by hitting a move that uses the Demon Claw, or by going into heat, you'll get a stack of Anathema, and this will open up a bunch of moves that either they stem from a move you already have. So for example, back X is during no stance, just normal boxing, is Zafina's armored move, right? Normally super unsafe, kind of slow, not super good. In the tier list of armored moves, it's probably on the lower end, right? If you do the armored move with a stack of Anathema and then press square triangle at the same time, on block, doesn't matter, all of a sudden this move that's super unsafe and kind of garbage is now safe, has extended range, and can really catch people off guard because, again, nobody plays Zafina. So this character that was, or is bad, like, let's not get it twisted, Zafina is bad, is now throwing off all the stuff I learned in this match and can really catch people off guard, right? Because a lot of people will block the arm move and they go, alright, my turn. And then they get blown up by the Anathema follow-up, right? Anathema also has a unique property to where even when you're not in heat, Anathema will still do chip damage, and as your health gets lower, will do additional damage. Now, of course, while not in heat, all moves that use the Demon Claw, Anathema or otherwise, will take some of your own life, which is sort of the problem with Zafina, but we'll get into that in the conclusion.
Final round. Fight.
Now, how should you play Zafina? Now, because Zafina is a stance character, and of course I know most characters in Tekken at this point are stance characters, Zafina is pretty hyper-aggressive, which again, most characters in Tekken 8 are pretty hyper-aggressive. But essentially, you want to utilize your stance options to constantly keep the opponent guessing. Where some characters really want to control space, Zafina can. She's capable of controlling space. It's not really where she wants to be. Zafina wants to be driving the ship. Zafina wants the enemy to be reacting to what she's doing, and what she's doing is always changing up. You know, I'm doing Mantis stance lows, I'm doing Scarecrow stance mids, I'm doing normal, now I'm back to normal style and I just grabbed you, and the grab transitioned me into Mantis stance, and now I'm doing that again. It's essentially, you don't really want to fall into a rhythm, because most of Zafina's moves, when blocked or crouched or ducked or whatever, or sidestepped, are super punishable and will get you blown up. Which is especially a problem because Zafina, her big combo damages are not as good as some characters, so she's often going to have more interactions than other characters, which makes that mix-up, guessing game harder. And that's sort of the crux of the issue with Zafina. I don't know if Zafina's the worst character in the game, but I think she's certainly close to it, if not it. The problem with Zafina is that she does a lot of things, but a lot of those things can be done by other characters, and either you don't have to spend health to do it, it's safe to do it, or it's much faster to do it. So, like, for example, right? If Zafina were to fight, like, a Zhao Ling, Ling utilizes a lot of low stances to sort of go under highs and mids and stuff, right? Zafina doesn't really have any super fast mids in her normal stance. So if she wants to contest that, she has to get into stance herself. But that's slow. And so it kind of becomes a problem with characters like that if they have a similar game plan to Zafina, where they want to control space, or not control space, they want to, mix up heavy stance pressure, Zafina kind of just has to sit there and take it. Maybe she can get lucky with, like, a counter if they go for a mid or a high or something, but if they go for a low stance low, Zafina can't really contest that unless you block it. Overall, I think Zafina is a very fun character, and, I'd rather fight. I think she's a lot more interesting than fighting another Kazuya or another Jin or another Brian. Anyways, that's all I got for you today. A little bit of a shorter episode. I'm not an expert on Tekken by any means. And I think I'm probably even worse than I think I am, because Tekken 8 is probably easier than previous Tekkens. If you have a character you want to see, or a specific game you want to see, leave a comment down below. I'll see you next month.
You win.
This is your fate.
Honestly, I find it super strange that Tekken is as big as it is, to be honest. Because, like, it's Tekken is hard. I know Tekken 8 is way easier, but to actually play Tekken, and you're not flowcharting, like actually interacting with its systems, is really difficult to do. Like, you have to think about everything that you're capable of doing, which is a lot for most characters. You have to think about everything that the opponent is capable of doing, which is a lot for most characters. And then how those two characters interact with each other. You then throw in heat, and then how that changes each character, which for some characters it changes them more than others. Like, there's been so many matches where I go to the match, and I'm just like, I don't even know what's happening to me right now. And I assume my opponent feels the same way when they fight a Zafina, right? Like, there's a game the other day, I played against a Leo. And this guy was just pressing buttons. Like, there was nothing I could have done. He was going into, like, a low stance, when I had never fought a Leo at that point. And, like, I didn't know Leo even had a low stance. And so he's going into low stance. He's blowing up pretty much all my high, get out of my face options. And I got beat badly. Now, that being said, I don't think that I would want less from Tekken, like less characters or less moves, because I think that's part of the charm. Like, when you got hit with, like, when Smash Ultimate came out and the whole gimmick was like everybody's here, more characters means it's more difficult to balance the game. That's just a fact of life. I understand that. But at the same time, as somebody who is going to get blown up by something regardless of if it's actually good or OP or whatever, I want the options. Like Marvel Rivals, we already talked about this. The balance is horrific. It's atrocious. But, like, would most of the community want less characters for, like, a big balance update? Probably not. Because, every time these games do, like, a health update where they don't necessarily release any content for a season and they just focus on balance changes, usually either not enough is done in the health update to fix it, like Rainbow Six, or the balance changes are blown up within a year anyways. So really, the only thing that happened was that we got less content for a season for balance changes that maybe fix stuff for a season or two, but then by this time next year, the balance is all over the place anyways. So what do we... it's kind of a waste of everybody's time. Like, if they were to ever make another Mortal Kombat Armageddon, where we have every Mortal Kombat character, which, by the way, would be so unbelievably dope. I don't know if we'll ever get that kind of thing again, but it would be awesome. The balance of that game would be atrocious. And I don't know, I expect Street Fighter's balance, I think, is really good right now. And as long as they keep on top of it, it might be manageable. But I expect as the years go on for Street Fighter, I expect the balance to be worse and worse every year. I don't know if it'll ever get to like Tekken levels, which is pretty... It's tough to swallow for Tekken, because there is some truly degenerate stuff in Tekken. Not like Tag Fighter degenerate, but like stuff that you have to answer or respond to, and you're like, I just got no... Like, King is an absolute menace. King has like the best 50-50s in the game. He has a grab game, because like, at the end of the day, King is a grappling character. And then if you don't know how to break grabs, or break the chain grabs, like, you're just going to take guaranteed damage. His Heat Smash is a guaranteed follow-up, like, it's not even a 50-50, it's like a 33-33-33-33, because it can go into a mid, a low, and a grab, which is insane. Like, King, you know, I make the joke that Melina in Mortal Kombat 1 is gambling, because you can do... You have like the overhead, which breaks armor, and then you have a bunch of lows that you can do. King in Tekken is gambling. You go down against that guy at any point, you have to answer to pretty much every single string ends in like a high, or a mid, a low, or a grab. And it's like, I don't even want to interact with this guy, man. And what the biggest problem, you fight a King, you win and they leave. That's the most effed up part about the whole thing. Is that you beat a King with this carried-ass character, and then they freaking hightail it out of there. Now, keep in mind, I didn't want to fight the guy again anyways, but it's effed up that he made that choice for me. Alright, get out of here, I'm rambling.